Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's my huge pleasure to be kicking off this awesome event here in the APAC in Singapore. I'm joined by amazing people from this region. We have Andrew, we have Nicholas, we have Abida, very high level, very influential people for this for the CX area in this region. So I'm super excited, really looking forward to our conversation. We're going to have about a 45-minute panel session. And then after that, we're going to open up the floor for questions. So please use the links on the screen to submit your questions. And we'll be doing the Q&A session at the very end. So just to kick things off, I'd like to give a moment for our panelists to introduce themselves, to talk about what they're doing. And yeah, well, let's start with Andrew.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. My name's Andrew Rickard. I'm originally from New Zealand, but I've been working in Asia Pacific since about 2003, so quite a long time. Work in the insurance industry, and I'm currently leading a transformation program for Chubb, one of the leading global insurance companies.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew. Nicholas, take a moment to talk about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Mike. So basically, I'm Nicholas Chi. I head internet and mobile development for businesses in UOB Group. So covering across 19 countries altogether. I think some of you may be familiar. If you are in Asia part, we've just launched Infinity in Singapore. So pretty soon you'll see it across all 19 other countries in the UOB group itself. I've been in UOB for about 5 years. And before that, I was actually with Temasek. But I've been working on internet and digital for the last 20 over years. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Abida, how about you?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Great to be here. I'm Abida. I'm heading the customer experience function at Food Panda Pakistan. I have 11 years of experience ranging from customer services, then HR, and then most recently to customer experience. My role involves creating seamless customer journeys across all channels. It's very closely linked with my passion for solving problems and creating impactful experiences for our customers. A key aspect of the work that I do is driving thought leadership across the organization, a mindset change that puts customer really in the center stage of everything that we do. My previous HR experiences of head of learning and development and manager workplace innovation and HR business partnering have contributed significantly in developing this empathy-driven mindset that I feel is very, very important for CX professionals.
Yes, I mean, you know, the employees are everything when it comes to CX. So that's, I'm sure that has been very insightful for you and in your career to both your past career and your career to come. Awesome, awesome. So we're going to kick things off with the questions or the topics. The first topic is kind of a, you know, icebreaker. I really wanted to talk about some of the interesting success stories, some of the things that you know our valuable panelists have done in the past or are currently working on, and kind of get some inspiration for all the attendees and for us all. So let's kick it off with Andrew. What would you like to share with us in terms of some of the digital experience success stories you've been involved with? Sure.
Look, we have to start by understanding that insurance is not as exciting or as forward-thinking as organizations like Food Panda and even banking, where it's much more advanced in the way you do things with customers. So some of the experiences that I've had with digitizing the customer experience and just improving how as an insurer we service customers probably isn't that doesn't compare. But I think the one that I thought I'd mention is from a previous role where working with the bank and the insurer we tried to take the sort of historical, the usual way of selling insurance or servicing customers, which is largely either face-to-face, you're sitting in front of a relationship manager in the branch, or it's over the telephone. And that's not where customers are today. Customers are on their mobile, they're on chat, they're on video, they're on everything we know about. And so the initiative that we did there was to start introducing that omni-channel approach that so often we talk about. But in my experience, most of the insurers and maybe to a lesser extent the banks, it hasn't really worked in the insurance world with customers so far. So we just did some obvious things. Simplify the actual digital experience. What does it look like on your mobile or on the iPad or on the PC? Changing the user interface, changing how it works, adding things like chat, adding the omni-channel approach, or even co-browsing technology, some things like that. But so there was an element of the user experience, but then also other pieces in behind the scenes that weren't particularly exciting, but enable the process. Things like simplifying the product design. Insurance is an intangible product. It's hard to sell. It's hard to understand. So we have to simplify it. And then the last element to it was really using the data. When you're dealing with a bank and an insurer, you have this wealth of data. But so far, there's not many organizations that have actually managed to take that data and interpret it and translate that into both the product and the customer experience. And so that was one particular digital experience that I thought I'd mention to start.
Yeah, but I think the obvious ones and like the not so flashy ones are, I think, the most important. It's really hard to nail those down and really make them work, especially in the back end where simplifying the processes for all those customer journeys is quite challenging, and not so fancy, but quite challenging. So I think there's a lot to learn from your experiences there. Yeah. Nicholas, what would you like to share with us?
Sure. So I'll basically share in terms of businesses doing online banking, or if you will, how do you sign up a product for businesses on the online channel, right? Typically, people would think that if it's a consumer, it's very straightforward because it's one person making the decision. But for business, you typically need to talk about account signing mandates, documentations for businesses, things like that, tons of evidence and paperwork that needs to be submitted before you can open up an account. So this is something that I think if you look at the digital world, on the retail scene, everyone's talking about online. But on the business scene, that's quite a very different matter altogether because of the perceived complexity, documentation. So this was something that was quite interesting, where internally we had to be able to actually prove case to our business counterparts about why this could make a big difference. And eventually we did. So we first had to actually design a journey for them to actually allow them to understand how that typical journey could be seamless for a business owner to be able to sign up for either loans, which is typically the easiest, because we always say, as a bank, it's easy to give money. But when you actually want to actually look at getting deposits, now that's quite a different thing altogether. So deposits was quite something that we were trying to look at. How do we, what Abhida mentioned, bring in the different channels so that some customers, when they go online, they fill up all the forms. How do we make sure it's easy for them? Example, fill up the form, and through the form itself, be able to segregate whether they belong to a small business or whether they belong to a large corporate. Because you have different journeys designed for each different segment. So we need to be very smart about how we design that journey, right, as customers are going through the form itself, rather than let the customer decide what segment they belong to. So we have to actually look into that journey for each of the segment, ask certain key questions, example, the size of your company, your turnover, how many staff you have. So this was some of the leads that when we get, it helps us determine if you're a small business versus a large corporate. And if you're a small business, what forms do we need to pass to you to fill up online or guide you through it? Or if you're a large corporate, how do we guide you in another track, right? And then also to make sure that we are able to allow you to sign online, to be able to upload by taking a picture of your documents through your camera, upload it online, and we will attach it together with your online form. So it's all seamless, right? So those are things that we actually design in the whole journey for the business to understand, as well as working with some of the customers through, I guess, if you will, some POCs and some test cases with the customers, so that we are able to fine-tune that journey. But the results were amazing, because what we were able to see now was the customers that went online to actually apply for a deposit operating account were actually bringing in deposits 2.5 times more versus those who went to a typical branch in the physical outlet. So these were things that over time, as we showed the evidence, right, and we continue to track the customer journey and the customer behavior, it allowed us to refine and approach it in a very different manner and increase the total ROI or return back to the business. So it became a win-win situation, both for the business to look at investing in such an experience, as well as from a customer standpoint, right, where it became a seamless journey and more convenient channel versus having to step into a physical branch. So those are some interesting things that we actually saw, but it's all about understanding the customer behavior and actually using that data to be able to refine and improve that even further.
That's a very interesting subject. I mean, when we talk about customers, actually, generally people tend to talk about B2C customers, but the B2B aspect is also very, very rich in ways that, there's a lot of ways that you can improve on, the journeys, even personalize it based on, segment it based on the sectors, as you mentioned, the size of the businesses. So it's a really interesting and really rich space and to explore further. I think it's very inspiring. Thank you very much, Nicholas. And Abida, how about you?
Yeah, the hallmark of my customer experience career, I would say, would be setting up the customer experience department from scratch for a telecom company in Pakistan. They had more than 40 plus digital products in the gaming, content, mobile agriculture, insurance, and education startup space. And in a matter of 10 months, we managed to improve CSAT by 11% while reducing customer complaints by 35%, alongside doubling the revenues. So the number bit is where I feel that we were, by showcasing these results, we were able to really make the business commit to customer experience related interventions. Now, on the strategy side that was adopted to achieve these numbers, I would divide it into two parts: the how and the what. The how, which involves around the way of work part, involved a lot of scrappiness, experimentation, creating an ecosystem which kind of really puts customer in the center. And very importantly, bringing customer voice in the boardrooms. And on the what part, we focused on customer journeys to make them friction-free, being very data-driven, that Andrew also earlier referred to as well, knitting together different data sets to see a holistic view of customer pain points, breaking the problem into smaller chunks to really understand the levers so we can solve the root cause and not the symptoms. I'm a huge fan of using examples. So let me share one to elaborate our strategy while solving a classic problem of how do you increase revenue. We're all familiar with purchasing apps via Google Play Store through our credit cards. Or now, Pakistan being a country with low financial inclusion, roughly 2% of the population has credit cards. On the contrary, 67% of the population has a mobile connection. So we partnered with the Google Play Store team on enabling purchases via your mobile number. So coming back to the problem statement, we wanted to increase our revenue coming in from the Google Play Store purchases. As in the case of big partners, your revenue margins are very low. So the only way that you make money is through massive scale. So how do you achieve that scale? The traditional approach would be to increase the marketing spend, but however, in this case, as it was a low margin partner, so we really weren't in the position to incur those kind of marketing costs. So we decided to work surgically towards improving the conversion funnel through low cost experimentation. We picked different customer segments and personas of active and passive players of popular games in Pakistan, like Clash of Clans, PUBG, 8-Ball Pool, etc. Divided them into test groups, identified hypotheses, did A/B testing for each test group to see where the customer journey was breaking for each segment. Now, being a telecom, sending promotional SMS was free of cost for us. So that was a tool that was that was a medium that was readily available for us in order to communicate with the customer. So we started with that. Like what kind of SMS leads to a better conversion, the one that is in a local language or the one that is speaking in a game language? What should be the timing of the message, early, evening, or morning? What works better, a bit.ly link that directs user to a landing page or a chatbot that answers the queries? What's more attractive for our customers, a free data MB so they can download that particular game for free, or instant cashback on a purchase and that mobile balance can be used wherever they want. So as part of all these experiments, it was very important for us to know why of what worked and what did not. So we were continuously connected with the customers on why they did what they did. In conclusion, one of the biggest myths, and this is where I'm a huge fan of kind of stepping out of the boardroom, is because your myths gets busted when you really talk to the customers. So our biggest myth that got busted was that, we thought the customers weren't aware, and that's why the purchases weren't happening. Actually, customers were very aware and they wanted to purchase, but they were not clear on whether we would charge them any additional transaction fee or there would be any additional taxes. And, a lot of times we saw that the failure transactions were failing because of some limits that we had set. And basic troubleshooting was missing. So there was no place or no community that we had set up for those gamers where they could, get to talk to each other and getting their issues resolved or getting answers to some very basic queries. So basically, the learnings helped us in making the purchase journey more localized and seamless for the organic traffic that was coming in. Another key question that this experimentation helped us in answering was that for every rupee that we spend, the user spends additional 2.5 rupees. So this business case made a lot more sense for a core telecom business where the recharge is one of the significant KPIs. But in the digital space, then we decided that we want to explore more partners with better margins. And that's what we did. And we eventually did. We're collaborating with another partner as well. So to sum up, lots of experimentation to understand customer behavior, consequently fixing customer journey based on those insights, creating a shared understanding of what success looks like across the organization, being very data driven. I think I can't really emphasize that enough. And this is something that we replicated across for all the products that we solved for. Which resulted in the complaint reduction, CSAT improvement, and revenue growth numbers that I initially quoted. So to sum up, if you ask me in one line, I would say that, from a customer experience professional perspective, the bigger you get or you want to get, the smaller you must act if you really want to kind of crack the problem.
Yeah, I love that you shared those numbers with us. I mean, it just is so astonishing how a good strategy and a good approach to a good incremental approach to customer experience and actually solving people's problems and making instead of trying to force a specific journey onto a customer, try to figure out what type of things they're already doing, like the phone number, paying through the phone number example is just really, really wonderful. So yeah, I thank you very much. This actually really ties in nicely to our next topic on return on investment. So we'd like to kind of discuss a little bit about what are the nice ways, or one of the things that you've tried in your journey in this space that has helped you get some organizational buy-in and really onboard the whole board, the whole organization with your projects. So kind of going into that sort of real world nitty-gritty challenges, I think will be really helpful for our audience. So yeah, let's start with Andrew. What are your thoughts on establishing a your approach to improving ROI and getting the organizational buy-in?
Sure. I think the first thing is who you're talking to. If I compare two different situations, one was all about sales. It was all about demonstrating, and it's similar to how Abida just said it. For every dollar you spend, what are we going to get in terms of additional sales? And that was, I think, fairly straightforward. It was getting to that point of being able to say, this is how we are changing the cost of sale, just basic metrics, using digital technologies, using the different sales approach. How do we reduce the cost per sale, increase the revenue? There's nothing particularly complicated about it. I think it's just knowing who your audience is. I'm going to those people saying, I think this will work. I think we need to spend this much money, and I think here's how much we'll be able to deliver. And in that particular situation, we were able to demonstrate about a double, 100% growth on the traditional sales process. I've got another more recent situation where changing the customer experience more around servicing rather than sales. And in that context, I'm having quite a different conversation with my senior leadership around the region. It's much more about the nuts in terms of metrics and ROI. It's much more about how do I reduce the cost to serve? And that's, within an insurance organization, we live and die by a couple of metrics. And one of them is what we call the administration expense, the administration cost. It's just the cost of running the business for everything that happens after the sale takes place. And so if I can take the hypothesis, take the customer experience that I want to deliver, the better customer experience, and show how that's going to reduce our cost to serve, everybody's on board from the finance side. At the same time, everybody's really happy because they look at what we're trying to do and they say, yeah, I see that's how that's better for the customer as well. It's more convenient. It's whenever they want it, wherever they want it. So I think for me, ROI really starts with who your audience is. You've got to be able to take your CX project, program, initiative, whatever you want to call it, and communicate that in a finance sense around some particularly relevant metrics.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really makes sense to kind of figure out what the core metrics are, and as you said, what sort of metrics the organization lives by, and really finding a way to tackle those and either bring them down or skyrocket them to build solutions around that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Nicholas, what would you like to talk about?
So basically, I'll cover on two areas. One's on the small business and one's on the larger business side. So on the small business, earlier on I mentioned about the online form and all that we actually created. So I still remember when I first started with the small business head, it was really a challenge because to them, it was businesses typically don't go online because it's too complex. So we had to actually start to actually create a very basic page to be able to generate leads first. And this was still a paper drop at that point of time. And this was probably a few years back already, right? So to be able to at least let the business head get a glimpse or taste of some of the potential leads that could come in, right? And over time, when we started to actually show month on month, year on year, right, we were able to show not only a bigger ticket size in terms of the deposits coming in, but we were able to also, like what Andrew shared, how do we actually reduce the cost of getting that lead or that sale? So typically, if you look at it, we all know for a credit card, most banks pay about $100 over just to get an approved sale. And here, when you talk about business, we could be generating at probably, I would say, 110 right, to probably 1/5 of the cost, which was huge, because then this was something that blew the business head totally. Because now you have a whole wide volume of customers or prospects that you can get through the online, filtered, right, qualified, right, to come to you, and bigger ticket size. So as we start to do this, this actually built over a short period of 3 years, where now they are convinced every year there's an ample budget put aside, because now if you look at it from a revenue standpoint, there's no going down, it's only going up. So it's just a matter of how much can you bring in, which then dictates how much budget you are able to then get to continue to invest in that channel. So that was something that we were able to prove. And then once we were able to do that, then the next thing is how do we automate it so that we reduce our costs further, so that we are able to scale it not just in one country, but in multiple countries thereafter. So how do we do that? For example, in Singapore, we are lucky that we have things like COPPass, SingPass, where you have a central national ID, right? So we were able to tie in all this very neatly so that the business owners can now, through the national registry, provide that verification, and all the company information will be populated onto our field. And that's how we were able to not only get the information, we know that the information is accurate and that information is authenticated. So that actually even streamlined the whole process even further to make it STP, right? The only thing we now need to cater for was basically exceptional flows where some customers may still want to talk to someone instead of having everything straight through, being businesses. So we then catered for that, where now if you choose to want to talk to someone, you could. You could arrange to have an appointment fixed at the branch, right? Where we have collected all your documents and all your information. When you go down to the branch, all you're getting is your account card and all those details, because everything would have been processed in advance. So even the moment you step into the branch manager or the relationship manager would already know you're coming down at this appointed time, and your entire welcome pack is all ready for you. So you don't spend more than, example, 10 minutes to 15 minutes at the branch. But we still ended up with that human touch, because the challenge when we talk about digitization sometimes is it loses that human touch. And in banking, that human touch, just like insurance for Andrew, becomes still very key. We still need to maintain that part. So we still have that so-called option, if you will, to end up the last part of the journey with a human touch, right? So that people will still feel that connection with people, right? And that's all about building relationship, building trust. So that's on the small business side. Now, on the large corporate side, what we wanted to make sure was when we actually start to actually create things like the mobile and internet platform, we made sure that we engage them in the design of the journey. So we had a small select group or community of customers where we would actually look at co-creating some of the journeys, some of the designs itself, so that their inputs are actually taken into consideration, right? So after we design all those things, we test it out with them, they feel a sense of engagement with it, right? And then when we roll it out, that was actually the true test of the pudding. So recently, when we actually put it out there, we had quite a fair bit of so-called recommendations on social media, not paid by us whatsoever, but customers actually mentioned that they welcome the whole change because this was actually co-created with some other customers, right? So they could see it coming from a customer's perspective instead of a typical bank perspective. Now, for large corporates, right, it's very easy to always say, because you have a maker, you have a checker. The people who make the decision are normally the checkers or the decision makers. So those people would be attracted by product offering. So even if you design a fantastic user journey for, say, a maker, would that maker be able to influence that change? Now, typically in the old corporate world, the answer is no. The product would sell. The channel would just to facilitate. But now we're starting to see that turn around where we're able to join up the dots to say which maker has got influence over which checker or which authorizer. So once you join up the dots, you're able to now know how to influence from a channel perspective. So those were things that we have done quite well to be able to engage customer into that journey instead of us thinking what would be the best design and coming up with it. So it's more of a co-creation now going forward.
Yes, this actually reminded me about the human experience that we sometimes talk about. You know, people don't buy from businesses. You know, people buy from people, right? And involving people into that whole process and getting their input and being proactive about all those journeys, I think is a really great way to ensure success and get everyone on board.
Thanks.
So congratulations. Yeah. And Abida, would you like to talk about how you approach ensuring return on investments and making sure everyone's on board with the new projects and new initiatives?
Yeah, sure. So I come from an HR background. So the dilemma that I commonly see in HR as well as in customer experience is that we have a tendency of living in a utopia of our own KPIs. Again, being a fan of examples, I will share another one here. So we had a content platform that offered around 25 live TV channels on a weekly subscription fee. So Pakistanis and all of those of you who are from the neighboring South Asian countries will know that how huge fans we are of cricket. So every time there was a cricket season, the platform saw an organic growth, which tapered down in non-cricket season. The platform had other news and entertainment channels as well, and we wondered that why there was a limited uptake on those. So we decided to do a deep dive. Extensive user research was carried out, and the outcome was a complete UI revamp, which we then took it up with the product folks for deployment. The product team was like, it's the cricket season going on, and we have weekly revenue targets to deliver on. So for the next 3 months, this UI revamp isn't a priority at all for us. Our sprints are locked, our tech resources are working on more pressing areas at this point in time. So basically, what the 2 months of hard work that my team had put in was practically shelved for the time being. And then in reflection, when I asked myself that what did we do wrong here, where we went wrong was that we went ahead in solving a problem that wasn't important enough for business at that point in time, because it wasn't in sync with their KPIs. Fast forwarding it to my current role, some of you might be familiar with the lightning decision jam technique commonly used in design sprints. We did that with our regional business teams as we wanted to drive actionability around NPS improvement. Now, I knew that if I asked them to solve for NPS, we would end up with hairy ideas on flip charts and all that. But once they all exit the room, they will go back to the things which are important to them, like order growth. So what we did was we went with numbers. In the food delivery business, what we saw was that delivery time and food related issues were among the biggest detractors in my NPS. So we didn't just say that, let's reduce delivery time or fix food quality to improve NPS. We went into the data, and the data that we gave them was that, orders that had a delivery time of less than 25 minutes, their customer reorder rate was between 45 to 50% versus 30 to 35% for greater than 25 minutes. So, if you're able to kind of work on delivery time and ensure that it stays within 25 minutes, there's like a 15% greater reorder volume that you will get. Similarly, talking about the food quality, what we saw was that restaurants with a rating lower than 3.5 had a reorder range between 6 to 7% versus restaurants which had a higher rating had a reorder rate between 11 to 13%. So that's also a couple of around 5% jump that we're talking about. So when you establish that linkage with the core KPIs of business, which was order growth in our case, that's when we got their buy-in, the budgets and the budgets as well. And you can measure the tangible ROI on your efforts. We could do that in the form of order growth. So to sum it up, if you want to have the buy-in, then work on solving those problems which directly impact the core business KPIs and establish that link with your KPIs. So eventually, when the collective efforts are put in, it's a collective win for the organization and the customers as a whole.
Oh, really interesting examples, Abida. I mean, I especially love how you focused on so many different segments and aspects of the businesses that you're looking into and the customers that you're looking into to improve those metrics. Is quite inspiring, especially how you can tie all that data together to get meaningful insight is quite cool. So thank you for sharing that. And actually, again, this kind of brings us over to our next topic, which is kind of prioritizing, maybe metrics or products, maybe journeys. No, we're always faced with prioritization challenges within our work, obviously, both in the digital side, transformation side, on the CX side. So I think it would be quite insightful for us to kind of explore your approaches to prioritizing projects, and what you if you have any tricks or tips you can give to our audience, that would be wonderful. So Andrew, would you like to start with this one?
Sure. Yeah, I guess for us, because it's part of a larger transformation program that we're running. It's a 5-year program. It's not a small thing. We have some very clear objectives for the program as a whole, which gives us a guideline of that's where we're aiming for. We're looking forward sort of 5 years into the future and saying, what would we like as an organization to be like? How do we want to work for our partner company customers, if you like? How should it work for our consumer customers? How should it work internally? So we did a lot of work right at the start of the 5 years, figuring out that initial view. And it's loose and it changes, and it's the strategy. It's not it must go in this order. But we know what we're aiming for. We know what our vision for the organization looks like. And so from there, we moved into a discovery process. And we do this for the region, but also for each individual country business. We're spread across 11 different markets around Asia Pacific. And so in each country, we're then going through this discovery process that in some cases, it's a 2-3 month piece of work that we'll do. And that will then lead us to, so here's the biggest problems that we're facing today. Here's the things that we should fix first, the things that will give the best result, or where we need to do something before we can then move on to the next. And what that's meant, at least for what we're doing, there's a whole mixture of things that we're doing. If I look across the region, there's some digitization of existing processes. There's some changing of product, where we've looked at the market and the product just doesn't really meet what the market need is. There's some where we're looking at robotics to automate some internal stuff. There's some operating model process changes. There's a whole bunch of things. But I think because we started with that long-term vision in mind, we started knowing that, yeah, we're here today, but we want to be over here in 5 years' time. That we can always, any time a new project comes up, anytime somebody's got a great idea, why don't we do this? We can always look back to that and say, well, that's the direction we're heading. That's what we're aiming to be. How that relates to the customer, and that helps us manage those priorities as they change, and they do change. Everything changes all the time, and with COVID coming in, and that's accelerated some things a lot faster than we expected, which is great. But it's also meant other things will follow along behind. So I don't know if that answers the question, Mike, but it's really, I think, the importance of having your long-term picture defined first.
Yeah, having that North Star,
yeah.
that shows you the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that resonates with a lot of us. Thank you very much, Andrew.
We talk a lot about North Stars at the moment, and making sure those are clear and understood.
Yeah, great. Nicholas, what are your approaches on prioritization?
Sure. Definitely aligned with what Andrew mentioned as well. So it's always important to have that North Star up there so that everyone is clear what is the end vision of what you want to achieve, right? So for us, it's always important to set that out, especially when we are rolling out a new channel for the country itself, establishing that so you don't end up deviating from your original intention, right? Then the next interesting comes when you roll out the channel already. And that's when a lot of incoming requests starts flooding in, right? Across all the different parties coming through. And that's the part where it gets a little bit challenging, where you now need to start to prioritize, like what Andrew said, which is the one that brings the biggest impact, right? Should it be to the bottom line, to the business itself? Should it be against the competition, right? Should it be in terms of to the customer? So these are the things that needs to be weighed out in terms of what is more important, and that gets prioritized. Now, the interesting layer then comes in is when you start to notice that some of these country builds could actually be relevant for the rest of the countries or the region. Then how do you make sure that this gets prioritized for the rest of the countries to be able to get that, right? Because you're leveraging off a good idea from another country, right? So these are the things that we try to balance across. So it's important to have that right structure to be able to support that also. So when I say right structure, I mean having, example, a core team that actually builds across the region, then having, I guess, maintenance squads in an agile format to be able to support local country yards, right? So you're able to be nimble, to be able to balance all this, to see now which one could I take and implement for the region, or which one do I need to localize more so that it's more meaningful for the countries itself. So there needs to be both sides, not just from the local country, but also from a group standpoint to be able to give that flexibility and the agility to make it ultimately right effective for the country to compete in their markets itself. So that actually is a very delicate balance that we have to manage from a group standpoint across all the different countries. So for us, it's always whichever gives the biggest impact and is aligned with the country strategy as well as aligned with the group strategy.
Yeah, really interesting. I think there are lots of angles to this, really, and it really comes down to the company DNA too. I think the famous quote from Jeff Bezos, where he talks about you're either a customer company or a product company or a competition company, and that kind of is always a challenge to what to prioritize and where to focus on which areas and so yeah, thank you very much for the insight, Nicholas.
Thanks.
Abida, what are your approaches?
Yeah, I think I've talked about it at length earlier as well. Basically, like you said, the North Star while prioritizing is picking the customer problem that is important for business as well. Identifying the pain points in that journey and consequently making it seamless for the customers. Additionally, when it comes to where to double down versus where to kind of pull out of, that's where you establish where the problem is big enough to be solved even. An example in the delivery space, customer cancellation is a problem. Obviously, you don't want a customer to cancel an order. But then going one step deeper into the data that, if the customer cancellation is happening before the restaurant started to prepare the food, then there isn't any cash loss associated with for us. So if there isn't any cash loss, then yes, while not denying that the number still needs to be improved, but is that really a problem big enough to solve? That's something that is debatable. Versus a problem that, when a customer cancels after the food has been prepared. Now, that's a big pain area for us, as that's a cash loss for us. So what is scaled versus what is not depends on looking at the data to analyze the scope and impact of that particular problem. And also, fixing the pain points, building on the same example, fixing the pain points for a post-food food preparation cancellation are very different from pre-food preparation cancellation. Pre-food prep cancellation is definitely a long-term project that we are working on, as it involves studying customer behavior, restaurant order acceptance thresholds, UI revamp of cancellation interface, etc. While post-food preparation cancellation would involve aspects like introducing a cancellation fee or customer education or ease versus difficulty of cancellation. So, the problem, you need to kind of narrow it down to really understand what is happening and why that is happening. And in all this process, I would say that be prepared that you might start off with a problem. And as you go deeper into understanding the levers, you might realize that it's not something significant enough to solve for in the first place from a customer perspective. So that's when you need to have the courage to really cut the cord. And it may be difficult in some cases, but then investing more time or energy on it is unfair to your customers, as you would rather be spending that time on solving something that is more important for them. So I think for CX professionals, while it's important to have a to-do list, but it's I also maintain a not to-do list with me, so that you ensure that your energies are directed towards opportunities that drive more value for the customers and consequently the business.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's a really nice way that you put it, not to do this, the anti-to-do list. No, and I think we all see a lot of people get caught up with the sunk cost fallacy, where you're too deep in to pull the plug. But it's always great to have a clear approach to what you're doing, and if things aren't working out and are not needed, just move on to the next problem, next to-do item. So thank you very much, Bida. I think that really resonates with a lot of people. Yeah, and actually, Andrew kind of talked about the nice things about the current climate, and how it, the positive approaches, and as well as the negative ones, of course. But now our next topic is around, what are some of the positive aspects of our current work from home environment, lockdown in some countries still, and this time of quite of a uncertainty going on right now. So I think it would be nice to kind of get some positive vibes going on with some of the good things that are happening with the current climate. So Andrew.
Sure. Look, yeah, it's hard to find positives sometimes, but there are some good things that come out, and I think the one that stood out for me is that it's accelerated some things that we've been talking about. So in my job, I spend a lot of time talking to people at all different levels of the organization in each country, painting the picture of where we need to be and what we need to do, what we need to change to get there. And so much of it is about digitization, better customer experience, all those sorts of things. Insurers are notoriously risk averse and conservative as a culture, in culture in the industry. And so often the biggest hurdle is our own internal culture in making those, as a hurdle to making those changes, I mean. So what I've found is with COVID coming along and suddenly everybody's working from home, we can no longer print documents and send them to customers. And the only reason really that we've still been printing and posting policy documents to customers is because we've never really taken that last step of saying, look, we know customers want everything to be on their mobile phone. We want them on email, we want on chat, but we're really uncomfortable about stopping printing because we've always done it that way. And so I think the COVID and so many of our teams suddenly having to be working from home, not being physically unable to do some of those things, that's really forced people out of their comfort zone, and it's accelerated some of the digitization. And I think my challenge now, my focus is to keep trying to push that, keep as much of that momentum going as we possibly can, because I think we know we've got to get there. Now we're making those first steps. We've got to keep moving that way.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. Nicholas,
Sure.
What have you seen that's a positive for you in this climate?
So likewise, in terms of the speed of digitization, we've seen a lot more people sign up for all these digital payments and all that. Like if you look at, say, in Singapore, pay now, QR codes and all that. Now people are starting to use this a lot more, right? Even wherever we travel into new buildings and all that, you need to scan a QR code, right, on your mobile. So it's actually brought up all this so-called, I guess, if you will, applications and experiences to increase that routine where people are a lot more comfortable these days. So we have seen an uplift in all these things. But of course, with that comes expectations also, because customers would also expect to have that wonderful experience and all that. So we need to actually keep up with all this. Now, it was also interesting that in my own development team itself, we had struggles because when COVID hit and we had to work from home, suddenly when you're used to co-working in an agile format, it changes the ball game completely, right? Now all our developers had to work from home. You have to track them to see whether they were able to deliver on time. How do they engage, interact? How do you co-work together when you can't really be there? So it was very interesting where we had to readjust to all these things. And it took us a good, probably I would say, 1.5 months to get the whole entire development team to be able to work back to the same productivity or levels that we saw before COVID. But given that, now that we've achieved that, then the next question comes, do we even need to go back now, right? Do we even need to go back to going back to the office where we need to have paid that expensive rental, things like that? So it now gives us new opportunities to look at new ways of working to still be able to deliver what we need to the customers, right? And the interesting thing also is even the customer engagements have changed. Now we actually organize things like webinars with customers to give them the training, things like that. So the whole engagement model has changed significantly. And it's just keeping up with the times with all this. But essentially to us, it's a good thing because we've seen that whole acceleration come up a lot faster versus in the past, you have to try to engage customer, encourage them through incentive, education program and all that to go digital. Now suddenly you have a huge push for them to move towards this out of their own accord. And they are now seeing the value of doing that, right? So that's, I think, the beauty of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are lots of cost benefits to that too when you have lots of things going digital. So, and also your point about managing the teams remotely and making sure because with Agile we're really used to having our post-it notes on the walls and working together and yeah, it's really challenging to do, especially creative and engineering and design work together. So yeah, thank you very much for those points.
So now we do the post-it pads virtually now.
Great. Abida, what would you like to talk about with your with some of the positive things that are going on with you?
I think from a way of work perspective, for the employees, it was relatively easy for us as compared to from Nicholas and Andrew because of the nature of the industries that they work in. Food Panda being in the e-commerce startup kind of a space, so it's a tech company. So by default, the tech tools are preferred for collaboration. So the challenge was relatively less for us. And so in the e-commerce space at this point, there's immense growth. And the new normal that in a way COVID brought in, it ushered with it so much ease for our users that they're actually not willing to go back to the old ways. The other day, I was doing some deliveries with our riders, and it was amazing to see that our customers are so comfortable that even for less than a $1 ice cream, they would rather place it on our platform versus not just walk out of their houses a few steps down the road. So that's the kind of ease that we have brought in the lives of our customers. And in e-commerce and more recently Q-commerce, speed is and will continue to be of paramount importance. And obviously, it needs to be backed with building a consistent, reliable brand that lives up to its promise every single time. This has huge implications for us on how the organization is designed. Like Nicholas mentioned earlier, that it's also important to have the right structures. Similarly, if we are not structured internally in an agile fashion, then we will never be able to live up to our customers' expectations of speed. So for us, more or less, yes, it has been a blessing. But having said that, I think because of the customer behavior and digitization happening as a whole, our industry wasn't kind of completely blown out of proportion in this case, and being unprepared for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a special thanks from all of us to e-commerce companies like yours to that were enabled us to get food from home and all our needs like that. So thank you very much for your hard work.
but yes, just adding on to that, it has kind of the other business plans, like going into other product lines, like having cloud kitchens and dark stores. I think COVID has definitely fastened the momentum and the need for those from our customers. So earlier, let's say if it was like that we're going to go live in 3 months, now it's like we're going to go live in 1 month, because the demand is so much out there. Let's capitalize on that opportunity right here and now, instead that coming to the market in 3 months time when the competition has already eaten up your share. So yes, there's that.
Yeah, actually this really ties in great with a question that we got from Chris. He's a CX practitioner in an e-commerce company, so that's quite relevant with you, Abida. And he's wondering, he's facing some challenges around getting upper management to really invest in the CX projects, and also as tied to that, he's having challenges around organizing all the different departments that are involved in making CX projects happen, like development, IT, marketing, and whatnot. So what would be your recommendations for a person that is having challenges like this?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I mentioned them as well earlier. That firstly, it's very important for you that you establish some small quick wins, so that they see that CX is an important enough stakeholder to have in the boardroom in the first place. It's not that CX is there to do before you go live. It's just a sign off that you do that. Yes, the testing is done and the flow is working as designed. It needs to be a lot more than that. And in terms of talking about what are the quick wins that you can establish, again, I'll build it down to develop the work that you are doing with the core business KPIs, because only then you will make them interested enough for you to even want to listen. And the product folks or the commercial folks, they're very, very strong on data, way more stronger than us. So but where our strength lies in is kind of developing that story. That what are the different, for instance, in your case example, in e-commerce, a very basic data point that you could start off with is giving them the visibility of what's your for your highest, most revenue generating partners, what is their order to complaint ratio. Start looking at these numbers, because tomorrow if you say that yes, while this partner is bringing in a lot of orders, but this is coming at an additional cost of these many customer complaints, so it's like from one side you're taking the money, and the other side on CS the money is going out of the organization. So net off, is it really working for the organization or not? So that's the starting point of the conversations that you can start off from. Then just to give earlier, just in the morning, every time you kind of go with them with the argument or with the change that this is not something that the customer values, make sure that yes, firstly it needs to be backed by data. So B, it needs to be validated by customer voice and customer sentiment. So if you're proposing a change, it's not because you feel that it needs to be a certain way, but because the customers feel. To kind of give you an example, I think I'm a huge fan of those because it helps in understanding the situation better. Earlier today in the morning, I was talking to my team and we were looking at the NPS numbers. Now the NPS survey that we have is the questions are standard across the whole of APAC. And based on what I saw in the data was that we have the standard question is that, would you refer it to your friends and family? And then the follow-up question has a few drop downs that, give us the reason of why you gave us that score. Now, what I saw that the customers who picked in example, let's say who picked in delivery as their biggest pain point. Now, if I look at only that data, my approach to that will be, let's solve delivery time problems. However, when I looked into the customer responses, I studied them more. And the last question, it said that, is there any other things that you would want to share with us? They were talking about food quality. So it was very clear by looking at the data that either the customers aren't really understanding, the fields that I'm giving, because in the last question, then the problem that they're selecting in the first one versus the problem that they're stating at the end are two very different things. So had I just jumped into that data and started to solve for delivery time, I think we wouldn't be anywhere. And so now my next ask to the product team or to the regional customer experience team is that this language that is used in the survey is too complex for Pakistan, because the literacy rate for Singapore and Malaysia and other digitally or more literate markets is very different as compared to Pakistan. But before I take it up with them, I'm going to get that validated from the customers first. So I have the data validation. Next, I'm going to reach out to those customers who filled in the survey yesterday, and I'm going to ask them that, you gave us this score. Could you elaborate on the reason for that score? And if that reason matches with the reason that they have entered, that means that that means it's good. And if it does not, then that means that they had a difficulty in comprehending what to select. So these are the small wins, I would say, that you can start off with, and being very much in control of the data points that on which the CX team is sitting, and drawing those correlations with the rest of the data that is available in the organization.
Thank you very much for your insight there, Abida. I'm sure that was really helpful for Chris. And we have another question from the audience around a new person that is looking into getting into the industry as a CX professional. This question is to the whole of the panel. Are there any tips or recommendations that you would give for up and coming, junior people in their early in their careers? Let's start with you, Andrew.
Not so much tips, but more just welcome. Yes, come. There's so many examples of bad customer experiences in my own organization, in companies that I buy from or receive services from. We need to do better. We need to do so much better in so many ways. And I think as a customer, my expectations keep evolving as new technologies come out, as things change in life. My expectations keep changing. I want to do more on WhatsApp. I don't want to deal so much on email. Whatever the next thing is that'll come along in the future, I don't know. But I think that in a role where you are thinking about the customer, where you are, going right back to the start with something Abida said, was the empathy mindset. And to me, the whole thing about customer experience is putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and understanding what's important for them. And so much of the rest of our companies is all focused on product or sales or doing the numbers or running the finance side. But customer experience is about understanding what's important for me as a customer, and then finding a way to deliver that in the way I want. So not so much a tip or anything else, but I'd go for it. Yeah, definitely.
Nicholas, do you have any tips?
Sure. I think most important, two things. One, to be curious. Always keep asking why, right? So that you understand, why is the customer asking this question? Why is the customer feeling this way? Why are they thinking this way, right? So it's important to ask all these why questions so that you deep dive enough. And like what Andrew said, so that you're able to put yourself in a position where you truly understand the customer's behavior. Now, the second thing is then on data, really looking at data. So like what Abida actually mentioned, sometimes what the customer says may not be truly what the customer feels, or they may not be truly behaving that way. So the data, in terms of behavioral data, sometimes is important to give you a clue as to what is the natural behavior of the customer. So it's important to be able to understand from customers' perspective, match that with the data to be able to truly understand the natural behavior of the customer, right? Once you're able to piece these two together, you have a better understanding of the customer's natural behavior. You'll be able to actually empathize that a lot better and be able to design a journey that is intuitive and seamless with what the customer would like it to be.
Yeah, so lots of analytical and design thinking aspects to all those, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Abida, any recommendations or tips or pointers?
I think Andrew and Nicholas both have voiced them already. Most important, be curious. Don't settle for mediocrity. Looking at averages, average numbers, or being average will produce average results. So, take those bets on yourself, set ambitious goals to know your potential, question status quo. I started my career from CS and then moved to HR, spent 8 years there, and then decided to come back to the customer space because I feel that this is the space I feel most connected with. Gain diversified experiences to see where your inner calling lies, what excites you. And above all, I can't emphasize it enough, be kind. You need to have that empathy in you for customer experience roles, because that empathy will make you look beyond the surface. And that's where the inner gratification will also come in for you. That the work that you're doing, the kind of impact that it has towards making people's lives easier, the people who are the masses, the people to whom the impact matters the most. I think those are the things that will drive you towards that will drive you every day. Because yes, being in this kind of space, you kind of become the most hated in the organization also. So be comfortable with that, because you're going to be the one who's going to say that no, anything that compromises on the customer is not going to be kind of passed on, or we're not going to be forward. So you'll have to be comfortable with being in a state of conflict also with people at all times. But then I would say that the inner gratification part, once that comes in, that kind of makes your whole job worth it.
Thank you very much, Abida. We're almost out of time, but we actually got a very interesting question. So I think it might be, now that we have all you people here to pick your brains on these subjects, I think one last question would be nice. The question is about how to influence senior management to kind of bubble up the CX agenda and these strategies up to the board and the CEO level. So it's quite I think it's an advanced topic for a lot of people, but I think we have a great panel here to kind of maybe give some ideas about successful approaches there. So Andrew, would you like to give a few thoughts?
Sure. I think we've touched on some of it a little earlier, where I think you've got to understand the things that are important for those senior leaders. There's going to be some financial things, so you can't ignore that. You need to be able to talk about your CX agenda in a way that matches to the financial side. It's a fact of life where we can't ignore that. At the same time, I think there is sort of a general awareness that at a softer level, a better customer experience leads to better results. Happier customers, more customers, stay longer, stickier, all of those things that we talk about. So I think for me, again, it'll depend a little bit about who you're talking to on the board or the CEO. Is it a financial discussion? Is it a more strategic discussion around how we grow the customer base? Those types of things. But I think you've got to stop. You've got to start the discussion with, what is that other guy, the person I'm talking to, where are they coming from with this, and how do I phrase my CX vision in a way that's going to make sense to them.
Thank you, Andrew. Nicholas, you're an executive director at the UOB, so I'm sure you have some great insight on this subject.
I'll try my best to share. I think the biggest challenge always is about being able to show to the board, right, the strategic imperatives of what you're trying to do, be it whether it's a ROI or be it whether with today's COVID-19 situation, this is now a standard, a norm, where you need to be customer-centric, right? And that actually helps because you do get a lot of information and data widely available today to be able to actually show how CX can actually help make that big difference in terms of how customers perceive you, right? And today, if you look at it, loyalty is a huge issue in today's context with digital. There's so much ample competitors out there moving at such a fast pace, being able to offer new products, new services, just like that. So what then can truly differentiate, right, your organization versus another? So if you look at it from a CX perspective, if you're able to link that CX values right back to your organization values, then that can truly set you apart. So let me give you an example. So at UOB, we are a bank. And at the end of the day, as a bank, what is the most important? Despite digitization, we still believe that the human touch is still going to be critical. And that's why you look at our slogan, right by you. As a bank, we have evolved many years for over 80 years, right? And it started from being the family's best friend, right? Where you don't need to ask for any documentation. You knew about the family background of the business owner themselves, everything. You were able to have that relationship, right? So with customer experience, you're able to now, with data and digital footprints, gather all this to be able to back you up on how you could actually build that unique proposition from a customer experience angle that's unique to your company values and your company principles. So when you have both the experience embedded in line with your company values, I feel that truly differentiates you from your competition. And it's also allowing yourself to set it apart so that it's not easy for another organization to be simply able to copy exactly what you do, right? When we talk about products, when we talk about channels, right, there's tons of tools out there that allows your competitors to be able to offer the same offering as what you do if you're just competing on the product level. So what truly differentiates is going to be what you want the experience to be for your customer in engaging with your organization. How do you make that different, right? So it needs to be something at a more strategic level, translated into revenue, dollars and cents, for the board to be able to see the value and the long-term aspirations that could actually help differentiate the company. I think once you're able to put this together, it puts a bigger weightage to the board. Most of the time, when we struggle to convince the board, is because they can't see that value of CX in adding to the bottom line or to the company's goals. So it's important to be able to show that out to the board.
Yeah, I mean, driving that value and, the core fundamental values are, I think, very important, at the board level. It's all about, it's all about the investor value and the return on investment. So yeah, I mean, thank you very much. There's some really good insights there, Nicholas. Thank you. And lastly, Abida, what would be your recommendations for bringing senior management, up to speed to influence the board, the CEO, and whatnot?
I think Nicholas has put it all so beautifully together that, if you're able to kind of create that magic with all those data points and that business linkage coming together, your job, at least on paper, will be done. But obviously, in practice, it's a lot more difficult to accomplish. Just adding a few points to that, more specifics, I would say that, as CX professionals, it's not about that, that we need to spend more in order to have a better customer experience, because that's not the kind of conversations that they want to hear in a very any organization wants to hear. What the value that they want you to bring in is how do you kind of draw distribute your customers into different segments and then see what drives each segment of your customer towards gaining more loyalty. Then very important, know what your competition is also doing, and competition direct and indirect, because in the digital space, the who your competitors are is kind of that line is kind of getting diluted. So know what they're doing, to be, and then benchmark yourself also to know where you stand. That's also important, and that kind of builds a more holistic perspective for you also. Then adding on to that, lastly, what Andrew also mentioned, that lots of research is available and data is available out there, that happy customers lead to or even linking employee experience, happy employees lead to happy customers, which in turn leads to better business results. But then quoting those generic researches isn't going to help. How do you kind of make it specific to your business? That's the kind of insight that will help you in getting that buy-in. And a good starting point is that if your position already exists in the organization, that means that the board and the stakeholders are already of that thought process that yes, it's an important area to have. So it's not that you have to convince them of the importance. So you're already there because they recognize the value, but now you need to take it to the next level, so that your team is positioned in a more strategic fashion and not an operational fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point to end the panel. I especially loved your point about the indirect competition. We actually shout out to my co-founder. We talk about that a lot within our company, and the example of the refrigerators and the ice companies, in the early turn of the century. So yeah, thank you very much, Abida, and Andrew, Nicholas. It was wonderful to chat with you on these subjects. I mean, you have some amazing insights and experience in this, in your careers. So it has been a treat for me to get to talk to you guys and pick your brains and spend this time and have this amazing, start to this CX Day celebration. It's actually almost an end for us. It's almost nighttime, but or it's almost going to be the evening. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, just some housekeeping items that we have. We're going to have for the attendees in our stream, we're going to have a short break, and in about 40 minutes, we're going to have a panel session from Dubai, and that's going to be pretty exciting. And the stream is going to continue on, so you don't have to change the stream. You can keep it on. We're going to have some animations and some soothing music for you to chill out to while you're waiting for the next panel. And hope everyone will have a great week ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.